What was your scariest a second later and I would have died moment? Outside my college dorm my freshman year there was this stoop that was half under the building, half out from under it. The building was 18 stories tall, so I'm sitting out there sitting on the steps, not under the building, and I get up for no real reason and walk under the building. As soon as I get under the building, a huge sheet of glass falls right where I was sitting. Some idiots were messing around on the 11th floor and knocked a 10x9 window pane out of its mooring. Your spidey senses started tingling. I was walking into a Miller's Outpost. Tells you the time period, and the M from the sign above the store fell down and hit me on the shoulder. It was a big glass sign. One moment sooner and it hits my head. Because it drew blood, the store offered to give me any item I wanted so I wouldn't sue. I chose an awful red cardigan. I was 16 and dumb. My friend and I were taking an elevator down to the cafeteria in our dorm in college. For some reason, we were arguing about something when the doors opened, so we hung back for a second. Then the elevator dropped 2 floors with the doors open. I still hate getting in out of elevators and I do a weird running start every time. Happened in Canada. Was an old building elevator, 1950s. We were in the elevator when it dropped. More terrified of the getting sliced in half aspect than the drop. I passed out at work and came around in the hospital. They diagnosed a bleed on the brain and eventually decided to drill a hole in my skull to drain the fluid. Just as they were about to put me under, the phone rang. It was the head of neurology. I actually had a burst aneurysm. According to my doctor, I would have probably been dead seconds after they started the surgery. Whoa, you are one lucky sob. I cannot confirm whether this would have been death, however it would have changed my and my parents' life like death. I was about 6 or 7 and I went along with my mum to go train the new puppy we had. The training ground was quite far away from home and I remember that it was a big field surrounded by a forest and a motorway on the side of it. I was told to stay in the car and play on my Game Boy, back when they were a thing lol. After an hour or so I got bored and I went to have a look at where my mum was with our puppy. The car park was a little while from the training ground but I decided to walk towards her anyway. In the meantime an older man, 30ish, starts talking to me and a naive little boy I talked back, regardless of all the times my mum told me to not talk to strangers. He convinced me I was going the wrong way and told me he would take me to my mum and puppy house. We ended up by the motorway side and we were about to walk down the bank to the side of the motorway where his car was parked. As I am about to disappear down the bank I hear the loudest scream of my name from my mum. I look back and feel the grip of the man tighten on my hand but I was just in time to get my hand out of his grip and run towards my mother. My mum runs past me to see where this guy is but he had just got into his car and drove off. To this day I still imagine about the what if scenario and how close I was to being kidnapped and potentially killed. When I was in junior high I was carpooling with another kid and her mom. For a reason I can't fathom she decided to race a transit train hoping to get across the tracks before the train stopped traffic. She gunned the car. I was in the backseat screaming number. She hit the train. Because I was in the backseat I was injured the least. I had a pointy piece of metal pierce through my jeans and flesh until it hit bone. Had she been a second faster the train would have hit us broadside and killed us all. This was 1980. She was not charged or sued. It was labeled an accident. She and her daughter suffered broken bones, lacerations and concussions. Because of the parental acrimony I couldn't be friends with the girl anymore. The family moved away before the end of the school year. I know at the time her mum was still not working. I'm not sure if she ever went back to work. Clearly she had or had developed some kind of mental or emotional problem which the accident probably made worse. I wondered if she was an alcoholic who began day drinking. But I never mentioned my suspicion to anyone. I needed crutches for a few months. My story is a second earlier and I would have died. Basically I got T-boned by a van while riding my bicycle. Missed me by a couple inches, destroyed the back of the bike, and threw me into traffic. When I was in middle school I called my mom on my cell during lunch because my head hurt so badly I couldn't move. She was one on speed dial. Well, the nurse came and brought me to the office for a checkup and some pain pills while I waited for my mom. We didn't live close. Nurse said no fever and to take me home and put me to bed. My mom watched me get into the truck and decided that maybe we should go to the hospital to be safe. By the time we reached the hospital, it was further than our home. My temp was at 104 and I was incapacitated. I had meningitis. If we went home and she put me to bed like the nurse suggested, I never would have woken up. It was viral meningitis, the less severe form, but it progressed very quickly. I had no headache when I arrived at school. By lunchtime I couldn't move on my own and I couldn't see because light was too bright. The nurse came to get me and I didn't have a fever. After waiting for my mom 10 minutes in the 20-minute drive to the hospital and 10-minute wait at the hospital, it was at 104. Yes, we told the nurse after, but there was only some of the symptoms when I left school. She never gave me or my mother advice again, just told symptoms and gave pain meds. Someone I used to be friends with died of meningitis B, I think. The sad part was how sudden it was because we all thought she had a regular fever. You're very lucky. A couple months ago I was in a head-on collision with some dude on crack driving down the wrong side of the road with his headlights out. I was going probably around 50 before I saw him. Speed limit was 55, so that's my best guess. Saw him with a second or two of reaction time. Managed to brake hard and swerve over only bad enough to total my car. But I still walked away with nothing more than a sore neck. If I hadn't seen the dude, I don't doubt that I could have died or been seriously injured. About 30 years ago my family and I were driving up to Jasper, Alberta in the winter. There was a slow car in front of us, and an impatient one behind us who kept trying to pass. Eventually the car behind us did pass, on a blind corner, and hit a logging truck head on. The slow car in front of us was also hit, but my dad managed to put us in the shoulder and not in the collision. This was way before mobile phones, or anything like that. So I remember my dad and my older brother getting out and going over the other cars and talking with the truck driver. It was this indescribable moment of total silence, and freezing cold, and disbelief until the authorities came. Quite a bit later, I remember sitting in the backseat with my younger brothers wondering what the heck just happened. I was freshman in college and came back to my hometown for fall break. I decided to go to a football game to hang out with some old friends. On the way home, I stopped at a red light, and when it turned green, I pulled forward. As usual, from the left, a truck suddenly hit me. He was speeding and ran the red light, T-boned me right in front of my driver's door. I luckily got out with just an injured knee and fractured clavicle and some bruising. It haunted me for a while that, had I pulled forward just a little faster or he had been just a quarter second slower, he would have gone straight into my driver's door and I likely wouldn't have made it. He wasn't even drunk or under the influence. It was just a 16-year-old kid not paying attention. Jackass. As a kid that's about to get his license, that is one of my biggest fears, is hurting someone. My family and I were driving down the highway when we see a stopped SUV in the middle of the highway with a family of 6 inside, and the car in front of us didn't get out of the way until the last second. Same crap has happened to me. Dark rainy night. A car in the right lane was just stopped dead. Car in front of me changed lanes about 50 yards beforehand. I was inches away from rear-ending him at 50 miles per hour. I was working on a pipe crew in 1998. We were installing a large concrete vault in a pretty big hole. I'm standing in a ditch about 6 feet deep marking grade while the excavator operator is digging. So to the front of me is a large excavator bucket, itself weighing hundreds of pounds and backed by powerful hydraulics and thousands of pounds of steel armature. And behind me is a solid concrete wall about a foot thick. And the ditch is only a few feet wide and too tall for me to jump or climb out of with any kind of speed. Suddenly the excavator spins to one side and the arm snaps out a full extension with full force, and the operator shuts it down. The bucket missed my head by about a foot. He climbs out of the machine, visibly shaken, and tells me that something has failed on the machine and the arm wasn't supposed to have done that. So as he's been digging, he's been noticing that ever so slightly there's a bit of a delay between his inputs and the machine's actions. And at the moment before failure he just felt something wasn't right and tried to pull the bucket in. When it didn't seem to want to, he turned the excavator just in case, and that's when the arm extended. Had he not, I would have been crushed to freaking death. There were 2 other excavator operators on that crew, and they were basically idiots. Had one of them been with us that day, I'm sure I'd be dead. Had a bad hangover and was kind of nervous jittery, which in turn made me extra watchful. I was driving home, light turned green and I started to go. Car going about 45 in crowded city traffic gives no fricks and goes right through the red. I slammed on the brakes and felt my anti-lock brakes engage for the first time in I don't know how long. A guy missed me by inches. Didn't even slow down. Had I not been hungover, I doubt I would have given the cross traffic that second look to see him barreling toward me. He likely would have T-boned me right in the driver's door. Not necessarily a second later, more like a few seconds earlier, but whatever. I worked at a private gun range for almost a decade and had one encounter where I could have nearly gotten killed. I was in what we called a trap house, a little bunker that holds a machine that throws clay targets for people to shoot. When we go into said bunker, we put a giant traffic cone on top of it that basically tells people there's someone in there. Keep your shotguns at your side unloaded and wait for them to exit. One day I was fixing some issues with a machine and was about to exit. I realized I left my bowl on the back shelf and stepped back and grabbed it. The second I did, I hear a shell go off and the cone on top of the house gets obliterated and falls in front of me. Turns out one of our members had his daughter there and was teaching her how to trap shoot. He didn't realize she loaded a shell when he was teaching her how to aim. Irrelevant cause his gun shouldn't have been pointed down range. He lost his membership over that incident. TLDR. If I didn't forget my bowl on a shelf, I would have stepped out of a bunker and had my head blown off by a shotgun wielded by an 8-year-old girl. Dang, that would have been a metal way to die. Instead, you'll probably die a boring death like the rest of us, in bed, surrounded by your loved ones. Earlier this week I saw a young guy almost get killed by a tram. He wasn't listening to music or anything, but it was early in the AM and he barely caught it out of the corner of his eye. The first thing he did was a textbook Wilhelm scream, and then he noticed me looking and said, "Well, I'm freaking awake now." It passed probably 2 centimeters in front of his nose. 1 second earlier, whatever. My dad and I were driving down the road after heavy rainfall in Vermont. He is driving, and I am fiddling with the radio. I hear a very loud crack, and before I can ask my dad what it was, out of the corner of my eye I see movement. An entire tree was falling on the road. Due to the heavy rainfall, the dirt was too wet to keep some trees in place. My dad stood on his brake, cartoon style, and we slid nearly right into the tree. I heard a pop before we fully stopped, and when we lurched back to 0 miles per hour, we were both breathing hard. My dad got out to check the damage, and the pop I hear was a branch hitting a headlight out. First time I've ever seen my dad call 911. It was scary. Could have been the end of us if he didn't stop to chat to the waitress after we left the restaurant to go home. When I was 5 or 6, we were on holidays in Australia. My mother took me to a beach that is known because it's safe thanks to a net system that doesn't let the sharks in. Well, when we arrived the beach was empty, what was kinda strange, but we continued to have a beach day and we had a bath. My mother even swam from one point to another. After that, we were going to the car, and some authority saw us. They told us to not enter the beach, because a family of alligators had entered in the water, and it was really dangerous. Since this is in Australia, these will be saltwater crocodiles, which are a lot stronger and bigger. Don't think I would have died, but to change things up from car-related incidents, I once left a lighter near a fire pit by mistake and I was near it roasting marshmallows. I had to go inside to grab chocolate and I came back out, and just as I was walking back to the fire pit the lighter exploded. My friend lost an eye in a similar incident. You are lucky. Not me, but my dad decided to stay for one more drink at a bar after work back in 1989. If he left before that last drink, he would have been on the Old Bay Bridge, very close if not under the section that collapsed during the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. I was a little kid when that happened, and literally every time I am stopped in traffic on a bridge, I tense up until I'm off because of the imagery surrounding that earthquake and bridge collapse. Never mind that I live on the East Coast and earthquakes are rare here. I used to work on a farm for a doctor that had antelope on the property, and one of my jobs was to feed them. My third day on the job was my first time actually doing it since my co-workers did it before. I went out there with the feed and started to pour it out so that they could eat. My supervisor shouts from the other side of the fence not to turn my back to the male antelope and I couldn't hear him, so the first thing I did was turn my back on the male antelope to ask my supervisor what he said. Almost immediately I'd realized what I had done and turned back around to see the antelope about to skewer me. I jumped out of the way and he ripped the shirt off of my back. I was like 6 or 7 when my dad and I were driving to his parents' summer cabin. Suddenly, a huge freaking moose runs from the forest, from our right, and across the road. I mean, there's no small moose, let's get that straight. But this sucker was out of this world huge, and we avoided hitting it by literally just a second. It was so close that I'm sure we would have hit it if either we or the moose gained a second somewhere. We would have been dead for sure. Hitting a moose with car is almost surely a death sentence anyway, but that thing was just so extra large that there would have been no chance. Sometimes I forget how big a moose is. Look it up and I will be like, well be damned, that's huge. I did some volunteering abroad in a place that had a crap ton of feral street dogs. Usually they minded their own business and were easily scared away. I tended to carry a piece of rebar in my backpack for this purpose. But occasionally they would gang up and maul people, generally kids and old people. One night I got woken up by the sound of a bunch of them barking and howling. I wouldn't have minded except I also heard the sound of a woman screaming. I ran out into the street to check it out, turned a corner and saw the biggest freaking pack of them I'd ever seen. Like 30 dogs, all circling around this lady. I started yelling and throwing rocks thinking they'd scatter. Which is when the whole pack immediately turned their attention towards me. They were coming at me with their teeth bared and their ears back, and I remember being really intensely aware of the thought, okay, I'm going to freaking die right now. It was at that moment that a dude in a rickshaw came tearing down the road, flashing his lights and honking. This made the dogs bolt. Driver saved my life, or at the very least prevented a wicked bad mauling. It was a really great affirmation about how most people will do what they can to help you when you need it. I was swimming with my dad and my younger brother in a lake. We had one of those decent sized blow up rafts that we brought out to play around on. I thought it was cool to swim underneath the raft and surface on the other side. Well, the third time I tried this, my little brother jumped into the raft and his body slammed into my head while I was swimming underneath, completely disorienting me. I remember just inhaling tons of water and trying to figure out which way was up, and every time I tried surfacing I'd hit the bottom of the raft and become disoriented again. I could feel myself starting to black out before I pulled myself up around the side of the raft. No one even knew anything was wrong until I started heaving up water and coughing. Similar to this, when I was around 8, I didn't know how to swim very well and was at my grandmother's neighbor's home playing in Thedger pool with a friend my age. Accidentally stepped out of the shallow end and slid into the deep end, and remember just sitting at the bottom staring up at the surface and starting to black out. Friend's mother dove in and saved me. Still love water though. 10/10 would swim under blow up raft again. Yikes, this gave me goosebumps. As someone who has worked as a lifeguard, I'm always just a bit paranoid when it comes to water. Also, I don't know much about various ways of dying, but judging by the look people get in their eyes when they are drowning, that crap is terrifying and probably not the best way to go. Not me, but my brother. No, really. He had a hard time in college, didn't like his major but didn't have any other ideas, had a hard time being motivated to attend class, etc. The final straw was when he ended a semester and was trying to get ready for the next semester. He was dropped by the scholarship that was paying his tuition for not making above a 3.5. He tried to hang himself in his closet one day. He told me right after in hysterics. He said he started blacking out and his head was fuzzy when his dog, half pit half Australian cattle dog, positioned herself under him, barking and released the tension on his neck. He got out of it and called me. He doesn't like to talk about it because it was really traumatic and, he said, embarrassing because of the stigma in our community. But he told me a few times that the instant he started blacking out he regretted it and didn't want to die. When he called me, I had a grown man crying and saying, "It was so scary. I was so scared." Needless to say, the dog is highly regarded now. LOL. If you're in a hopeless situation, get help. Seriously, make a call. Frick what people say or think. I freaking love you. D live butthole. I have Australian cattle dogs. They are some of the smartest and most attentive dogs out there. I am glad she was there to save his life. I hope he is doing much better now. My ACD stopped me from stepping on a very venomous snake once. I'm convinced ACDs are lifesavers now. I have a Staffy too, but he's a doofus. A second doesn't really apply to my story, but about an hour does. When I was in 2nd grade, my appendix swelled up and burst. I had severe pain for weeks while the doctors tried to figure out what was wrong. After staying at the hospital for some time, they suddenly said they needed to operate. They had finally figured out what was wrong and had to basically clean out my insides. Since it had burst quite some time ago, I was in a pretty critical state. If they hadn't realized soon after they did, I wouldn't be here. Once I almost stepped on a scorpion fish. That was a close call, believe me. It was in no more than 3 feet of water in plain sand, so be careful everyone. I was about 9 or 10 and riding a horse for the first time on a trail ride. My horse suddenly pricked its ears and went a little faster, and a tree fell across the trail directly behind us. On the 16th of December 2004, I was with a friend having a beer in a bar on the Koh San Road in Bangkok, Thailand. It was the last week of my bumming round the world and we had a decision to make. Do we go home for Christmas or spend it on the beach in Phuket? Neither of us had been to Phuket and we thought it would be an awesome end to living out of a backpack for the last 18 months, but on the other hand, Christmas at home with the family was also appealing. So we flipped a coin and went home to the UK. Flipping that coin a second earlier or later could have sent us into the path of the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami. How crazy is it to think someone's entire life, at that moment, rested in a coin toss? Checking tire pressure on the drive tires of a semi. I was between the 2 rear axles and the front was raised on ramps. The brakes failed. I felt it shift and I slid out before it completely rolled off the ramp. My husband tells me the day we met he planned to kill himself on the way home. We met while both working at a theme park near our hometowns. They were just about to open a new roller coaster and opened it just for employees for a day. The train had 2 seats on each side, and my husband and I were both there alone and were matched up to ride together. It's a little scary to think that if I had been only a single person farther behind him, we would have never met. He said I saved his life because he had planned to wrap his car around a tree on the way home, but after we met and exchanged phone numbers, he was too excited to talk to me when he got home that he forgot all about it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.